if we have to take everybody we find walking in a disco and say, hey, fella, you just got diagnosed as needing clinical therapy here, work therapy. Take them out. You want to do all that jiggling. We got a place to use some of that energy, right? Oh, we're going to use American methods, which means to mobilize the world along the lines of the American system. And every nation that wants to go along with us on that, and most of them will, just like some of Alexander's generals wanted to survive and therefore went along with him, we will do that. We will not ask the opinion of third world countries. We don't have to. Because a government of a third world country that doesn't want that is no good. Therefore we ignore it. The government that does is a good government. Therefore we honor its opinion. Because a government will not develop high technology agriculture, develop industry and high technology infrastructure and education for its people. A government that sits back and says, we don't want any of that imperialist culture or European culture. That's depressing. We say, okay, you're stupid, fellow. Get out of the way. We're going to do it anyway. It's not going to be democratic. Not in that term. Because our problem is the world is morally unfit, the present state of civilization, to survive. And we have to break civilization out of its present state to a higher state. We must move people by having people who can lead in crucial positions of leadership, and move the unworthy and unfit that have to be moved to do good work the way Alexander moved his generals. Now that brings me to the point about the International Caucus of Labor Committees. Although we did not set out to do so consciously back in 1966, for very lawful reasons, this organization became a replication of the Academy of Athens in terms of scope of work, direction of work, understanding of its role in the world. This developed over a period of years, largely because of the central determining character of the organization from the inception. The fact that the organization was based on a conception of political economy and method, in which the conception of multiply connected manifolds associated with Riemann was at the center of the political economic perception from which we worked. And that perception, as a matter of method as well as economic conception, was the characteristic and the determining characteristic which shaped the way our judgment developed. And as we came into conflict with opposing forces on this, as we sorted various forces in the world out and found out what was real, what dripping behind the stage props to see what the reality is behind the appearances, then we found ourselves becoming that. And so we have therefore found our activities variegated, and as this conference will emphasize, one of the things we're emphasizing, and certainly not because of the Year of the Child, anything the UN comes up with, we're again. Particularly UNESCO, UNITAR, or UNCTAD. No, but because we are at a point, we've got two problems in the world. First of all, drugs and a miserly and dastardly and treasonous destruction of the process of education is turning out increasingly from our secondary schools students who aren't qualified mentally to graduate from the third grade. The minds, the productivity, the potential of our society is being ruined. And we say, and all of us agree more or less on that, in the population, those of us who are healthy and sane, we say, well, let's at least get back to what we had in the 50s. Something that works, even though it may have imperfections. But that's not adequate. We have to make reforms, not in the direction of socially relevant basket weaving and sensitivity courses and things like that, or mainstream education, as I call it now. We used to call it sewage, now it's called mainstream. We need to reevaluate our educational processes as they were. We need to come up with new approaches which facilitate the development of the potential genius of every child. We are tired of producing mediocrities. We're now producing imbeciles, but we used to produce mediocrities back in the 50s and before that. You know, we had one or two bright kids, someone who talked a lot but didn't know anything, and a lot of mediocrities. Now today you've got mostly imbeciles coming out of our schools in terms of functional capabilities. The reality is that most children have the potentiality to be a genius if that potentiality is developed and seized upon early enough and given the correct direction. It's our job to do so. Our approach to music is precisely that. We took seriously the question of focusing on music because we recognized that Plato was right, that Al-Farabi was right. Is the first thing that a child is capable of mastering in the sense of organized education is the well-tempered system of counterpoint, polyphonic counterpoint. The first thing the child's mind can master in terms of a comprehensive knowledge of lawfulness on the one hand and freedom, i.e. creativity within the context of lawfulness on the other. The child now understands something Kant never understood, that to be creative is not to violate the laws of the universe, but to develop new qualities of solutions in terms of the basic lawful ordering of the universe. And once the child's mind grasps that freedom and creativity and law are not antagonistic, except if you misunderstand law, once the child has understood that, then the foundation is laid, the foundation of reference for the child to understand anything. We know in the next order of learning that after the child's mind has been given a foundation by learning the music of Bach and Beethoven, or at least that method, which is indispensable if you're going to produce geniuses. And no other kind of music will produce geniuses, so just don't waste your time with it. No matter how much you think you like it or somebody else likes it, it won't produce geniuses. We're concerned with producing geniuses. The next thing is geometry. Not the way it was taught in school, but geometry taught without quod erat demonstrandum, without logic, without Aristotelianism, because Aristotelianism destroys the mind. We want no Aristotle or no influence of Aristotle in our school system. And once they've learned geometry, we're going to teach them physics. What, at the age of 8, 9, and 10? I do not want a single child of this nation to reach the age of 16 in the future without being a qualified genius in physics. We need that, and it can be done. We look back at the last dark age, or the aftermath of the last dark age. In the 14th century, when out of the bowels of the Black Death, the bowels of the same policies that Cyrus Vance represents today, or Henry Kissinger, or the rest of those scoundrels, after half the population of Europe had been wiped out within a century by these policies, which the Carter administration and the Connolly and Reagan all espouse today, a group of people like us, that is, that's our heritage, organized the Golden Renaissance. One of the key things was the development of teaching institutions like Gerhard Grote's Brothers of the Common Life, which produced a generation of geniuses into the 16th century. We today face the same thing. On the one hand, we face a dark age. And it seems, if anyone thinks clearly, that the forces of the dark age are now victorious and will prevail, and therefore hell will come. Now, we can avoid that. We must avoid it. We will avoid it, not simply by resisting the dark age, by going out in the street and screaming against the dark age. Please keep the dark age away, Mr. Banker. That isn't going to work. We will defeat the dark age by building a new golden renaissance. It is the function of this institution to be the catalytic agency which produces people who are capable of leadership and supplies to those who have the function of leadership throughout the world additional vital resources of knowledge and policy through which the world can be steered into and through a new golden renaissance. Thank you.